Memory 8125. Sunlight spills over Renjiro Yamaoka sitting cross-legged in the meadow. His horse, Raifu, waits patiently. The samurai inhales, considers the weight of the katana at his hip. His mind wanders for a second, the calm disrupted. His chest tightens. The green fields before him offer no peace when he knows his son spills the red blood of innocence upon them. He is on the trail to stop him. Kazan, the man known as the Oni, his son who has made it his mission to purify the samurai, not through discipline or honor, but by massacring the farmers who oppose them. A savage reaction to minor transgressions. The sun carves its way through the sky as Raifu carries Renjiro along a quiet road. Modest homes dot the field ahead. No one toils outside. There is an unlikely stillness, as if he journeys through a painting. In the distance, a man watches, leaning against his home. He does not move. As Renjiro approaches, the scene becomes clear. The farmer is impaled on the wall of his home. Blood pools at his feet. A crow takes flight. It ignores the corpse, instead landing further down the hill. Renjiro follows. A pool of pitch blackness shuffles in the tall grass ahead. The dark stain screeches, a vast murder of crows lambasting the intruder. Reluctantly, they take flight, stretching across the sky like a dark scythe. Blood soaks the earth where they stood. There are hints that the viscera is human, a roughly cut hand, an exposed femur, but the number of victims is impossible to know in the pulverized gore. This cannot be the work of Kazan. How could he? A sour lump rises in Renjiro's throat. He wonders if the commoners' tales are true. It must be an Oni that possesses Kazan, for his son could never commit such evil. Memory 8126. Renjiro slumps with fatigue. He hears the voice in his head. Go home. You are no samurai. He is tired. He acknowledges the truth. I am no samurai. The voice demands more. You are not Renjiro Yamaoka. He nods. I am not Renjiro Yamaoka. The faded memories return. He is a child, torn from his parents. He does not understand why. They scream his name. Hachi! He never sees them again. He's brought to a snarling man who looks him over, opens his mouth, ignores his crying. Good. He will be for my son. He is taken to a boy to be his playmate. The boy's name is Renjiro Yamaoka. They become friends, but there are rules. Renjiro must always win. If Renjiro hits him, he must accept it. He goes with Renjiro to reading and fighting classes, but not as an equal. He must downplay his abilities. He is there to amuse, a living toy. And like a toy, he becomes dull. After a decade, he is cast off to work like the other servants. From then on, Renjiro looks at Hachi with bitterness, as if embarrassed of the bond he had with a commoner. As Renjiro comes of age, he assumes the duties of a samurai. Beneath his facade of discipline and mercy is cruelty. He leaves scars on Hachi. Renjiro boards a ship and Hachi goes with him. The Yamaoka family influence is set to extend to a new territory. Hachi pulls a cart of supplies aboard. A storm hits within hours of casting off. Tossed from bow to stern, Hachi grabs Renjiro's hand as the samurai is nearly thrown overboard. He wants to let go, but he sees the face of the boy that was his only friend. He pulls him aboard. A second to catch his breath. A thunderous crash. Parts of the hull explode into splinters. He's thrown to the deck. Through the ocean spray, he sees Renjiro, a jagged piece of wood pierced through his neck. Renjiro clutches his throat, tries to hold in the blood, his eyes wide as they fade into a furious, reluctant expression of death. The ship comes apart. Hachi awakens on a beach amidst debris and corpses. Nearby is a chest he brought aboard. He breaks it open, pulls out Renjiro's armor, katana, and the Yamaoka family crest. Hachi will never speak his true name again. On this day, he becomes the samurai, Renjiro Yamaoka. Memory 8127. Renjiro. Hachi. Who are you? Too late to erase the lie now. So it is Renjiro who rides into the next town. A commoner bows her head as he passes. Nearby, a few men speak, glances cast in Renjiro's direction. He pretends to ignore them. Muttered words reach his ears. Father to an Oni. Evil blood. Not a real samurai. Yamaoka butchers. Come to kill. Behind him, someone grabs his armor and attempts to pull him from his horse. He moves with the motion, spinning from his mount to land on his feet, a hand to his blade. The sudden fear struck in those around him stokes their anger. Shouted words become waves of indistinguishable sound. They demand answers to questions he cannot hear. A club slams against him. A hand yanks at his mask. Raifu whinnies and runs. Renjiro moves his hand to his sword. No. He cannot act as his son would. He would rather die than let the Yamaoka name drown in shame and blood. A blow from behind pushes him to the ground. Strikes resonate through the armor to his ribs. He pushes his hand against his blade, ensures the frantic grips that pull at him cannot unsheath it. The strikes continue until the crowd's anger is quenched. They walk away, spitting and laughing. He pulls himself from the mud, whistling for Raifu. Nothing. The horse lies at the roadside, his body still. Later, when Renjiro is beyond the sight of others, he will clutch his wounds and grieve. Memory 8128. Renjiro examines his bruises. Nothing serious. But the violence, how did it come to this? He remembers when Kazan was a young boy, shouting angrily. They called me imposter noble. They sung and they laughed. The guilt bears down on Renjiro. When he assumed the Yamaoka name, he could not convince everyone in the village of his lie. The lone survivor of a shipwreck, his only proof of identity being armor, a blade, and a family crest. It was a suspicious story. Were it not for what he learned as the playmate to a noble, he'd likely have been caught. But he was well-spoken, knew how to read, and could fight like a samurai. It dispelled most doubts. Most. The whisperings of an imposter noble would never be fully silenced. It fueled a rage in Kazan. Renjiro tried to teach his son patience and humility. He wonders what else he could have done. I suppose I could have taught him the truth. Memory 8129. Renjiro sees Kazan ahead in the moon's dim glow. His son is a hulking man, even more intimidating under slabs of armor. They stop 10 feet apart, two silhouettes in the night. The unmasked face, barely illuminated by the moon, is his son's. Not an Oni, but a boy, intoxicated on power he wields over the weak. It is Renjiro's duty to punish the crime and return honor to the Yamaoka name. Kazan is not just powerful, but fast. He preys on weakness. The men unsheath their katanas. Renjiro assumes a defensive stance. He focuses on his injuries, the bruises over his body. His shoulder drops, sword dipping slightly. Kazan reacts, taking an aggressive stance. Renjiro exhales, pushes the pain away, hones in on his target. In a split second, he straightens up and lunges. His blade finds an opening in Kazan's armor, drawing blood. Kazan stumbles, his neck exposed. Eyes focused, blade ready, Renjiro shouts with grief, brings his sword back, and hesitates. The kanabo crashes into Renjiro's head, smashing the mask from his face. Agony. The taste of blood in what feels like a gaping wound. He hears his son far away wailing. His heart races, gushing blood from his body, and then slows. Calmness descends. Ethereal dreams fade into nothing. Silence. A lack of anything. A whisper? A tug at his barely conscious mind. The blood on his skin turns to ice. He shivers. Someone is there. Kazan? Go play, boy. Let me sleep. Kazan. His son. A child. Still young enough to be saved. He follows him through the fog as though his consciousness drifts through a storm. There is something I must tell you, Kazan. Renjiro lies in the dirt. The boy is gone. There is fire ahead. Strange men and women huddled around it. Kazan? Something pulls his ankle. He kicks. His arm is wrenched back. He resists, lurching forward. He's punished for it, his limb nearly torn from its socket. A spidery talon wraps across his bloody, broken face. Another grips his body, another his leg. It drags him through darkness, twisting, pulling, squeezing, as if unsure whether to abduct, strangle, or tear him apart. He opens his mouth to scream. Black fog pours out.
The Creeping Fog 1. The black fog clung to Jacob as he rode into the village. Thick tendrils of fog swirled and eddied around him, forming cryptic shapes that reminded him of heroes and villains from his collected tales. Jacob shooed away flies and squinted through the haze, searching for any signs of life, but not finding any. He coughed and cleared his throat and was beside himself with the smell of putrid flesh and blood. Limbs and heads were scattered about. Men and women lay in unnatural positions. Others lay butchered and twisted, their eyes gouged and their mouths hanging open. "Wilhelm, where are you?" His hand instinctively moved to rest on the hilt of his dagger. Long and deep shadows shook and shuddered with hidden menace, as if the darkness held secrets of the unknown and unknowable. Jacob could feel his heart racing as he scanned the abandoned streets of the village for something, anything, and he found nothing. There was an oppressive silence, save for the caw of crows and the wind howling through small, crumbling stone homes. Something was watching him. He could feel it in his bones. Just as he seemed ready to call out his brother's name, a tiny figure sprang from the shadows, startling his horse so that it reared and almost thrust him to the ground. The creeping fog, 2. Whoa! Jacob struggled to stay in his saddle. He held on tightly and waited for the horse to calm down, and when it did, he turned to a young boy in tattered clothes, who was no older than 10. The boy shifted nervously and stared up at Jacob with frantic eyes. He was in shock, trying to discern whether Jacob was real or a figment of his imagination. Jacob swung down from the saddle and approached the boy, his hands raised in a placating gesture. He meant no harm. He just wanted to understand what had happened to the village. "Steady, young friend. I wish you no harm," he murmured as he edged closer to the boy. "What happened here? Who attacked the village?" The boy trembled. His lips quivered as he stared at Jacob and struggled with his words. "They're gone," he whispered. "The fog, it took them." Jacob's brow furrowed. He didn't understand. The boy was describing the fog as though it were a living thing. He kneeled to the boy's level, ignoring the chill seeping into his bones from the damp and bloody ground. "What's your name, boy?" Jonas," the boy stammered. "Calm yourself. I need you to tell me what happened here." And as the boy considered his words, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had befallen this village was far beyond his understanding. The creeping fog, 3. Jonas's words tumbled out of his gasping mouth, his small frame shaking like a tree in a storm. "It was Father first. He went out to check on the sheep but never came back. Then others started disappearing too. When I looked out from the barn, I couldn't believe what I saw. The fog taking my aunts, uncles, and cousins as if a living snake from the depths of hell." Jacob's face hardened. He had heard strange tales about a fog in the Black Forest, acting as a doorway between worlds, but he had never heard of it devouring people. "How many were you in the village?" 34. Jacob nodded. "I have heard many stories about the fog, and I believe with all my heart we will find your father and the others." The boy's eyes widened with hope. Suddenly, the air around them shifted. The fog began to churn and roil like a pot of boiling molasses. Jacob's hand instinctively went to his dagger. Words caught in his throat. Jonas raised a hand and pointed a trembling finger towards something in the approaching fog. Grotesque forms that defied description emerged from the molasses like nightmares given form. Motionless, Jacob stared at the fog as creatures from all the cautionary tales he and his brother had collected began to take shape. He closed his eyes and muttered silent words of hope. The creeping fog, 4. Jacob opened his eyes and reached for the dagger at his belt. He stopped breathing, his eyes widening as he absorbed the advancing darkness. Then, from the encroaching fog, a tendril shot toward Jonas, curling around his ankle like a deadly snake. Suddenly, the boy released a blood-curdling scream, and Jacob lunged forward, but it was too late. and Jonas was instantly yanked away and dragged into the deadly fog as his terrified cries faded into the murk. Cautiously, Jacob went after him, pushing forward into the darkness. It wasn't long before he came upon a monstrous almond tree he half remembered from a fairy tale. It had rotting human limbs as branches, and on those branches dangled 34 heads caught in agonizing screams. Jacob continued through the fog after the boy, swinging his dagger in wild arcs, slicing through the vicious tendrils that reached for him, his movements growing increasingly desperate with each passing second. "Boy, where are you? Speak!" As if in answer, a tendril wrapped around Jacob's wrist. Instantly, he yanked his arm away with a scream. Then he heard something. Something familiar. A voice. It came again and again. "Jacob, help me, brother!" Jacob froze. "Wilhelm?" He peered into the darkness. "Wilhelm!" The Creeping Fog, 5. "Wilhelm!" Jacob yelled. "Where are you?" No answer came. Only the sound of his ragged breathing and the inhuman howls of creatures moving through the fog came to him. Each creature appeared more menacing than the last, as if the fog were inspired by his memories, pulling from a palette of horrors from his fairy tale collection. "Brother, where are you?" Jacob muttered, evading a tendril. "Is this what I get for playing hero?" He remembered their childhood games, and how he'd always play the role of hero in whatever imaginary story they had concocted. There had been so many games, so many stories. He sighed and hoped Wilhelm was okay, wherever he was. As he thought about Wilhelm, tendrils of fog suddenly wrapped around his legs. With a start, he contorted his body and swung his dagger in wild, chaotic arcs, making the tendrils disappear. Still, his movements became increasingly desperate as the tendrils continued to manifest and slither up his body, crushing his chest and lungs. Was this how it ended? Suffocated by fog, attacked by the shadowy creatures from the tales he and his brother had spent their lives collecting? No. His story couldn't end like this. Their story couldn't end like this. With this thought, he summoned every ounce of strength left within, and with a terrible roar, he twisted and broke free from the fog's stranglehold. Instantly, he stumbled backward, gasping for air, the fog suddenly dissipating before his very eyes. Within moments, the village stood silent, bathed in dying sunlight. There was no sign of the horrors that had assailed him just moments before. Somewhere, his horse nickered to let Jacob know he was okay. Jacob took a calming breath and ran a shaky hand through his sweat-soaked hair. He looked down at his dagger in his white-knuckled grip. No blood, no gore, nothing, just clean steel. He didn't understand any of it. Then he felt the presence of things unseen observing him, measuring him, relishing his suffering. He had no idea how to explain it, nor did he think it could be explained. But what he felt was toyed with, like the fog were a giant black cat playing with a wounded mouse. "I'm losing my mind," he thought to himself. "The fog isn't alive. It isn't watching me. I've heard too many stories, and my imagination is getting the better of me. This carnage has nothing to do with fog. Perhaps an attack from a neighboring village. Perhaps revenge. Perhaps a feud. Perhaps something else." Jacob didn't want to think about it as he made his way to his horse, his boots scuffing the dirt. Fear and frustration knotted inside him. He was exhausted and more scared than he had ever been in his life. Yet he refused to return home without his brother. And so, Jacob pushed the fear out of his mind and remembered the good nights, the nights when his father would keep them up wide-eyed with wonder with stories by the crackling fire. The stories had captivated and inspired them, so much so that they would spend the rest of their lives chasing stories and sharing them with the rest of the world. Reaching his horse, Jacob grabbed the reins and swung himself into the saddle. Then, scanning the village one last time, he muttered a silent prayer for the boy and nudged his horse forward just as a songbird landed on his horse's nose. The bird glanced at him for a long moment before taking flight, guiding him toward the outskirts of the village, where the road ahead vanished into a dense, shadowy tree line. "Hold on, Wilhelm," he thought. "I'm coming for you, brother." And as he passed beneath the first trees, darkness enveloped them, so that Jacob's hand instinctively tightened on his dagger, ready for whatever horrors might wait in the depths of this dark, twisted fairy tale.